I'm going to weave two components together. The initial message that I prepared for this morning, which is on not missing the 5 opportunities that are available this week for each one of us. And then the other woven into that will be the importance of writing your particular story, and it weaves beautifully in. So I'm like, all right, Lord, here we go. I will attempt to share my screen. I've got the capacity to do that here. So I will be doing some screen sharing with PowerPoint, and then I'd be happy to take all the questions at the end. So I'm going to start out. This is the book that Tina referenced. And I guess I'll say up front, this is my new devotional, Lessons from the River. And if at the end, or after we end today, if you want to email me, I would be happy to sign a copy and send it to you. No charge to you, just my gift to you, because I want to encourage you with it. But as I was impressed upon the title for today's message and kind of the path that the Lord was showing me, I remembered that the first devotional in this book is called Don't Miss the Opportunities. So with your permission, I'm going to read each devotional is just a quick short 2 pages. And I know you can't see that, but it says, don't miss opportunities. And I will say, my rivers here in New England do not compare to your rivers. So your rivers are ginormous. So think of a smaller river, perhaps. It said, when it rains, trickles tumble into the river, adding to the rising waters. As the waters rise and the current increases, a prime opportunity for river tubing is presented. There is a window when the tubing is best, when the water is high and the rapids create water rushing over the rocks. The mistake made by many is to put off the opportunity for another time, forgetting that the waters will recede just as quickly and the opportunity will have passed them by. Isn't that true of life itself? Opportunities present themselves at the most inconvenient times, and too often we let them pass by. It may be a job promotion that means a change of locations. It may be a request to lead a project and you decline, only later to realize that it was a stepping stone to something greater. Maybe the opportunity was to meet somebody for dinner, but it would mean canceling a meeting and driving 2 hours. It could be that an invitation to fish or hike was declined in favor of doing housework that could have waited, or yard work. I'm reminded of the opportunity people had to attend a lavish banquet. Instead of taking the opportunity when it came, each one gave a reason for why they could not attend, and they missed a great opportunity. Luke 14:16-24, this is the English Standard Version. He said, a man once gave a great banquet and invited many. And at the time for the banquet, he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But all alike, they began to make excuses. The first one said to him, I've bought a field and I must go see it. Please have me excused. Another said, I have bought 5 yokes of oxen and I go to examine them. Please have me excused. And another said, I've married a wife and therefore I cannot come. Let's not miss the opportunity and be a part of the crowd who did. And the prayer here was, Lord, thank you for the opportunities that you bring my way. May I learn to recognize them and respond quickly, knowing the window of time will not stand open forever. So the reason I wanted to share that is because that's true in the writing industry, in the publishing world, that sometimes God brings us opportunities and we're not prepared for them. I will say that I've spent 6 such months. This book came out in April, and then I was teaching at a couple of writers' conferences in the spring, and throughout the summer, I went to other writers' conferences. And as a result, one thing leading to another, my summer became very crazy. And I kept thinking, I just want to go to the beach. I just want to go play in my garden. But the opportunities and the open doors that the Lord had given to begin working with CBN and to begin working with the Christian Women Living magazine and to write stories for an upcoming Christmas devotion book that's coming out. A bunch of different opportunities came my way, and I found myself struggling with what am I going to do? So I want to say that, the word balance comes to mind. I chose to put a lot of effort, probably 40 hours a week after I get out of my day job at the church, 40 hours a week, writing and speaking at conferences and doing what needed to be done. But now I'm in a slower season. And just like Tina said, now I'm looking forward to the winter months to be able to slow down and write a little bit more, and get ahead of the game for next spring and summer. So what I want to do is I'm a person who, because I was a sign language interpreter, I learned to talk about the punchline first and then go into the details. So I just want to say the 5 opportunities that I'm going to talk about, and there's some bonus ones too, but I just want to let you know, I'm going to talk about your books. If you are a person that wants to publish fiction or nonfiction or already have, but we'll talk about that. But more importantly, the opportunities that are in front of every one of us right now to do something for the Lord to advance the kingdom. There are blogs. Either you have a blog or you can guest on a blog post somewhere. There are devotionals that almost every website I look at, Christian websites, are looking for devotions to be submitted. So there's those, and we'll talk about the how and the what, poetry, short stories, and articles. And then a couple of bonus things that I'm going to touch on is, and I'll send all of this to Tina so you guys don't have to try to remember everything I'm saying. So a couple of bonus ones is the social media aspect, and I'm going to talk about that, and then contests, and I'll talk about those. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I'm praying that this is going to work. I practiced enough last night to make sure I could flip back and forth. So I've got to share screen, and hold on 1 second. Oh, no. Where is it? Hold on. Seriously. There you go. Okay. Hold on. All right. We are in present mode. Okay. So this is, like I said, a PowerPoint that I developed for a writer's conference. I will make that available because I may skip through it. So I'll make it available for Tina to share with you. But I wanted to just say, how important it is that we write our story, whatever that is, and that we can change lives by doing that. So I'm just going to kind of go through. This is not necessarily true. I'll address it in a minute, but oftentimes our greatest ministry to others is going to be out of our deepest pain. Rick Warren's the one that said that first. He said that before his son committed suicide. It was just something deep in his heart and something that I truly believe in, because I think that as each of us who are called to be writers by the Lord, it's for a purpose, and everything that we have in our heart that we've been through, that we've experienced, I'm going to talk about those, but that's not just for us. I mean, yes, it does mold and it shapes us and our character and brings out the dross out of our lives and different things, but it also is, and predominantly the reason we're called to write, I believe, is because of all the others who need to hear what we have to to say to them, what the Lord has to say to them. So it's important that we listen to what he's saying, and that we're willing to begin to share different parts. Now, I don't necessarily mean, and you'll see that as I go on, I don't necessarily mean that we may, but we don't have to write a memoir, but it's more of those pieces in the blogs, in the articles, in the poetry. And it can also be books. So I'm going to go back here and there we go. So the choices we each have that we can make are, we can tell nobody about what we've been through, all the pain and whatever's gone on. And that's just the end of it. We're just not talking about it. Or like I just said, we can share bits and pieces with people, but maybe just friends. We're not putting it into print. We'll just share a little bit with so-and-so and that's it. Or we can be transparent about what we've been through. And that's where we offer hope. And I just read this past week that authenticity is really what people are desperately looking for in today's world. They want to know that there are people who have been through what they've been through and have some hope for them. And unprecedented times that we're in, those who have just come through Hurricane Ida, I got hit, but not nearly what you guys did down there. And there are people that are looking for hope just on that one aspect of life alone. So you can talk about emotional pain. You can talk about your physical pain. You can talk about trauma and crises you've been through. You could talk about estranged relationships. You can talk about the death of a loved one. There's a lot of things that we've, different avenues that the Lord can use. And there are people who are waiting to hear it. So you got to be bold and strong. And, you may be thinking, well, I'm not going to write about, I'll tell you my personal thing in a second, but you might be thinking, well, I can't do that. I just can't. And I'm telling you, well, the Bible tells us we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We can do it. It's just, are we willing to do it? So I just touched on the disaster that y'all have just dealt with and are still dealing with. And Tina was sharing with me yesterday just how difficult it is. We don't hear that up here. We're not hearing any of it. My heart broke yesterday when I heard the reality of what life is like down there. So it may be a life-threatening disease that you've been healed from. And, there's a story there, and there's other people who are waiting for hope in that aspect of life too. They just want to know that there is hope, even if the doctors have said there's no hope, even if it's a lifetime, diagnosis, and this is the way it is the rest of your life. You're always going to be on this medication. You're always whatever. And if you've been healed from something, that gives somebody hope that maybe the Lord will heal them too. Some people have escaped all types of abuse, and it's not an easy topic, and it has to be handled sensitively, but there are people who are in those situations now or have just gotten out of it that need to know that there's a way to overcome that type of situation. So there's that. And I put in some other ones when I wrote this. The Olympics had just happened, and so I was talking about how to rebound and win a sports title. And there are some people who have done that and have overcome odds, and not just Olympians, but just normal people like you and I have stories like this. And these are only meant to jog your thinking process here. And then maybe you have been one of those people that's had to raise kids as a single parent. And the list goes on and on of all the different types of circumstances that you've been through, that each one of those we could discount and say, that's not that important. But I'm here to tell you it is important. And I'm going to show you some statistics in just a second here. If I can, hold on. I went back. And Dennis, right? I said I will talk about the fiction characters. So when, I wish that I wrote fiction, because here's what I see as a benefit. These stories of our lives can become an entire book or novel, or a short story, or we can weave the characters in such a way that we are portraying different aspects of life. And I'm just going to show you a thing here. So I Googled just some titles on Amazon, and here's what I found. All of these are adapted from true stories. The Secrets That We Keep. Interesting title. If You Tell. The House We Grew Up In. See What I've Done. And The Perfect Nanny. Those were top on the Amazon list when I Googled this, just to see what kinds of stories we'd come up with that were actually based on true stories but you're fictionalizing it, for obvious reasons. So, hold on. Sorry, I skipped it. I wanted to show the characters here. So these are kind of tough to look at, not all of them, but think about either yourself or someone that you can create as a character. So there are, somebody that's the first one in their family to graduate from a high school, a military widow that got that knock on the door she didn't want to get, or he also, a woman that's been trafficked, a cancer survivor, a prankster, somebody who overcame an eating disorder. There's so many more opportunities that you can weave into your characters' lives. So I would ask you to consider, if you're not already doing that and you're a fiction writer, think about your own story and then weave it in, because they will become very believable because you've walked the roads yourself, or you have a family member who's been down some roads, and it's going to help them. So I don't want to go all the way through there. I'm just going to go back to here for a second, not to scare you. Hold on. Okay. So what I want to impress upon you is that we have each walked down some paths. We've each had some experiences that the Lord does want us to share with other people. And I'm sure you're already doing it. To me, it's a reminder constantly that while we can write about other situations, we can write about other people. I, back in the day, was a newspaper journalist and did some columns. I did some feature stories. It was very easy, and I was a reporter, so I could easily write about other people. And I did not want to write about me. But this is where the Lord has brought me to now, that what I said to you about being transparent, the more transparent you are, the more impact on other people's lives. Because what I just said is, people desperately need authentic writers and speakers that are going to tell them the truth of Jesus Christ, that there's hope, that the scriptures are filled with hope, and not just reading the Bible, but to look at you or your work and say, like, hey, they did it. Maybe there's hope. So I'll just tell you that the Lord has, in this last year, started probing very deep. It was, like I said, very easy to write about other people, other things, surface level things, until he started digging down and saying, no, your actual platform and your message and what's coming up in the future is all about your story. And I spent about 6 months arguing with him and wrestling, because I don't necessarily want to share that story. But I will say that the opportunities and the doors that have opened over the last 6 months are only because of me sharing my story. And that's very difficult to swallow. And I'm like, well, Lord, you're going to have to give me the boldness to do it then. So my background, just so you all know a little bit about that, is while I, was working professionally as predominantly as a counselor, I ran some nonprofits and I worked as a mental health counselor, and then gravitated toward the pastoral counseling. And that's what I do now. In the midst of that, I was in a very difficult home situation up in Maine for 25 years. And, it's a way of life up there. It's just a way of life. In that upper northern, almost to the Canadian border section of Maine, it's the highest domestic violence per capita in the country. It was at the time that I left. It got to the point where I just literally had to get out. You just learn to live with it. But a couple of my girlfriends were killed by their husbands. And I'm like, well, he's going to kill me or the kids if we don't get out. And I had to leave. And that's how I got to Connecticut. In that process, I walked away from everything. So when somebody says, I've lost it all Ingrid, right? My heart broke, but I was like, I've been there and done that. I literally had nothing except for 3 kids in tow and the clothes on our back, and we had nowhere to go. A car that I borrowed from a friend, and I somehow got here in Connecticut. And I landed at a campground that was a Christian campground of my friends, who said, can you help me manage the campground? But the condo was already occupied by his brother and sister-in-law. And I was like, I have nothing else to do. Sure. And so I did. Now, in the middle of that, my first book, which I'll show you, this is the first one. This was published in 2007. This was ready to come out. And of course, it talks about my marriage and my husband. Now I think this is no longer valid. I called the publisher and I said, I don't know what to say, but I'm in the middle of a mess and a divorce now. And he said, I'm going to talk to my wife and pray. Now, in my thinking, I would have thought like it's over, like all the dreams of writing the book, all the effort, this is the content that I had spoken all over New England at women's retreats. And here I am. And now all of a sudden it's fallen apart. And he comes back to me about a week later and he says, my wife and I have prayed, and we believe this gives you a bigger platform than before. And I'm like, bigger platform? Now I'm homeless. I'm in charge of 3 kids. How does that become a bigger platform? But it did. And then it got even more bizarre because, and this is all a part of the story, it got more bizarre because then I found myself diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at the same time. And then I had to realize, wait a second, there are people in my life that have had cancer, and some have, been healed through medical technology. Some have been healed by the Lord, and some have been taken home, and that's how they're healed. And so, but in my situation, I began to realize, wait a minute, God would not, that's not his character. That's not who he is. And so I started praying, and I said, God would not have given me sole custody of these kids and had me move 400 miles away where I know no one, have no church family, know anybody, to be safe, and then have me die of cancer. That's ridiculous. And that's not the God I serve. And so in my specific instance, I was like, that's not God, that's the enemy. And I started praying, and guess what? He delivered me. And miraculously, when they finished the biopsies and stuff, it wasn't there anymore. And then I went on a missions trip, and I met my husband and my now husband. And now I am in Middletown, Connecticut, and I am not living homeless in a campground, but I was. And then I started working at the church, and God began to rebuild my life. Now, why do I say all this to you? Because the message that I bucked against the Lord and don't want to share about my story is exactly what people need to hear. They need to know that there's hope. And so I'm in the midst of writing a book, and I'm working with some publishers. I'm not sure if I'm going to indie publish it or if it'll be traditional. I'm leaning toward indie. I've done both, but I lean toward indie because I can do it quicker. But the book is called From the Ashes You Will Rise. And it literally helps people that are knocked down by all the life circumstances to be able to rise back up again. So that becomes the book in more of the entirety of my story. But what I just said about blog posts, what a social media posts and those kinds of things, I'm beginning to, I'll call it leak out. There's a reporter term for me, to leak out little pieces of that ahead of the book coming out. But it has been difficult, and I'm being transparent with you and telling you that it's difficult to be able to be honest enough to share with people like they've been some hard roads. And the last piece I'll share about myself is that I used to say to people, listen, I've been through it. I've seen so much stuff. I've worked professionally and seen things, but in my own life, I've pretty much seen everything. Let's see if I can do this without breaking down on you. I've been through everything except a child being in prison. And I can no longer say that either, because I have a daughter in prison. Well, she's out on house arrest right now, but she's going back, and it's probably going to be for 10 years, unless God does something different. So she is a believer, and that's, it's the way it is. And so now I have a heart for those that are dealing with incarcerated children. And guess what that does? That, I'll say, requires me to be able to now step up and help the next family and the next person that's contending with these things. And I've learned things I don't want to know, but I know how to do it. And do you know what the Lord did? Just this past week, I got a phone call from the New England regional director of prison fellowship and said, your name was brought up in a meeting and they feel strongly that we want to partner with you. And I'm like, partner with me? What do I have to offer? They said, not knowing that my daughter's in prison, by the way, they're like, well, we want you to come into the prisons and start teaching. And I'm like, what kind of impact is that going to have? Never could I have orchestrated that. I say all this because I had to be willing to be honest and transparent. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow for a second here, but I have 3 more. I've done 2 podcasts recently, and I've got 3 more on the books right now. Never in a million years would I have imagined doing a podcast or being a podcast guest or anything else. But again, the opportunity is there. And when I've shared my story with people, they're like, oh, would you be on our podcast and tell all that? And I'm like, not really, but but you have to be willing. And so let's see if I can do this. Okay. So here's what it is. Exactly what we're doing right now. Just sitting and chatting. And if you're a podcast guest, then you don't have to start your own podcast, but being a guest, it's mostly all testimonial. People want to know, they're listening. Again, the message is the same. There are millions, yes, billions of people that are out there and they're hurting and they're desperate and they don't have the Lord. They don't have hope, or maybe they have the Lord, but their faith isn't strong and they just want someone to tell them it's going to be okay. And they hear our story and all of a sudden they're like, maybe I can overcome because she overcame. So I just wanted to go back to this statistic, and you may or may not listen to podcasts. I do. 60% of households across the globe are listening to podcasts. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to reach every person if you're a guest on a podcast, or you write a blog, or you have a YouTube channel, or you write a book. We all know we can't reach everybody, but God will bring the people that are in our target market that we're supposed to reach. And Tina mentioned earlier about how difficult it is to market. And there's a whole process of learning how to market our materials and things like that. But, and I've been around the industry for 20 years, close to 20 years now, and I'm still learning new techniques. I'm constantly taking classes and going to workshops and learning how to stay on the cutting edge so that I can reach that niche market. But podcast is another way to do it. It's an audio version of being able to tell things. But here's what I want you to know is, like, people are listening. They've got these things in their ears constantly. If you ever, especially the younger people, and I'll say, I turn them on when I'm doing dishes and cooking dinner. I'm like, well, I could just be cooking dinner, or I can turn on and listen to a podcast. And so I have certain ones I listen to. A lot of the ones I listen to are writers who are giving writing and marketing technique opportunities. And then I have a couple of other women's ones that I like to listen to. But don't think that they're not out there and the opportunity isn't there, because 60% of the whole global population of 7.6 billion or something like that, 60% is a lot. There's a lot of people listening. So there's another option. I'm not saying you have to, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. If I could make my screen do what I want it to, be great. There we go. All right. So another opportunity. 5 billion videos watched every day on YouTube. 80% of those are under the age of 49. So why am I telling you that? And I'll tell you, I do not have a YouTube channel. I do not plan to have a YouTube channel, but there always are people who want to and can reach their particular target audience that way. So I'm called to specifically, my target is predominantly women who have been through it like I have and are trying to get back up, Christian women. But I just met somebody yesterday who ministers mostly to teenage girls. Well, guess what? Teenage girls are on YouTube. They're on TikTok. They're on all these different platforms. And so YouTube, if you have not heard, just created, I'll say the competition for Instagram Reels and TikTok videos. They have it called YouTube Shorts. Of course, they're going to jump in because that's the competition we're in right now. So so if you have a target audience that's listening or watching a lot of short videos, and I'm saying like 1, 2, 3 minute videos, TikTok, Instagram Reels, then YouTube Shorts is another opportunity, or maybe a longer one if you're teaching something. So there's that opportunity. So again, blogs, devotionals, articles, short stories, poetry, all of those are opportunities that I want to share about a little bit more, or a topical nonfiction book, or your entire memoir is a possibility. Fiction novels, like we talked about, that are talking about your life story, or characters that you develop that adopt part of your life story. And then there are the audio options and some video options with podcasts and YouTube. So the reason I share this again is because I feel strongly, and when Tina and I were talking yesterday, it just kind of dropped into my spirit, like, you know what, we can talk about all the opportunities, and I'm going to spend some time now doing that, of how we get our story into those different avenues. But I felt like it was really important to take the time to say, don't think that whatever you have been through and are going through is not important. And it, depending on the specific of your situation, it may only be appropriate for a short story or for a blog or whatever. It's a specific single, I'll say like a one-day incident. It's probably not, unless it was an incredible day, difficult or positive, one or the other, it would probably not fill a whole book, one day of your life. But you'll be surprised at how one day, writing about one day of your life, can bring encouragement. And I didn't have this planned. I'm letting the Lord lead, but I'm going to show you. So this book just came out, not that you can see it very well, but it is called, I don't even know, Celebrating Christmas. It is put out by Grace Publishing. And I know, because they changed the title like 3 times. So I'm like, what is the name of that? But I responded to an opportunity back in August or July or something, that Blue Ridge Mountain, I had gone to the Blue Ridge Writers Conference virtually. I've done everything virtually. I'm not getting to hop around the country like I want to in person, but I attended the conference, and then I joined the Facebook group. That's one of the ones that I'm going to recommend that you join, the Blue Ridge Writers Conference group. You don't have to have gone to the conference to be a part of the group, but they have amazing information. every day is just so much stuff on how to hone the craft of writing and how to connect. And there's so much there. So I one day saw that opportunity to write a Christmas story. And Dennis, you asked, do I write fiction? No, and so they wanted true life stories. And what they do is they donate all of the royalty money to Samaritan's Purse, which I then was thrilled about. So I was like, oh no, me. Just because of the whole idea that all the proceeds are going to Samaritan's Purse, we don't get anything. And I don't care. After all, right? I've lived homeless. I don't care about money anymore. It stripped me of anything. I don't care. No matter. But what I did was I wrote a story about last Christmas Eve, and it's called Silent Night, Pandemic Night. And I was, again, very transparent about how difficult it was to not have any of our 7 children and 10 grandchildren and their spouses with us. For the first time in life, it was myself and my husband. Everybody was everywhere else, and we couldn't be anywhere. And it was horrible. And you all probably had horrible experiences through the pandemic too, but this one really hit me because we always have everybody over for Christmas. So I just simply wrote about that. They said 1,200 word maximum, blah, blah, blah. I followed the guidelines. I submitted it and they printed it. That's an opportunity, right? But also just, I posted on Facebook that it was out for my copy. I got my copy. The rest isn't out yet. It hasn't been released. So I have certain friends who have now made it public that I sent them a screenshot of the 4-page story. They're like, hey, I don't want to wait. Can't you just, okay. And then they post on Facebook, well, if you know the right people, now I'm getting more messages like, hey, can I see that? Okay. What happened, and this is why I'm telling you this, is one particular person said, there I was sitting there happy that I didn't have to see anybody and go to Christmas stuff this year. And I could just sit and watch Hallmark movies. I didn't even think about the fact there might be people in pain. Another person messaged me after I sent her the screenshots, and she said, I thought I was the only person that felt that way last Christmas. What are you doing this year? I said, this year we're having Christmas. If they don't want to come, fine. I'm going to show up on their doorstep. Hi, Grandma wants to see the kids. And so, this little seemingly insignificant in the millions and millions of books that are released this year has already started changing lives because I took the opportunity, saw a submission opportunity, said, well, okay. And the Lord in his sovereignty decided, okay, one of them is going to be Mel's. And I put it in there. And now without it even coming out on the market yet, it's already changing lives. And I was like, that's cool. That's why we write. And we don't get to pick how many people see it or how many lives are going to be changed. And I've always thought, the starfish story, if we write and we change one life, if what we do in our however many hours, if it's a shorter, blog or something, great. If it's a short story like this, great. If it's an entire book and it takes us 2 years to complete and it changes one life for eternity and for the kingdom, who are we to decide it wasn't worth it? So it has stayed me. Now, while I say that, the balance is that I have started praying this way in 2021. Lord, my time is precious and I'm not getting younger. So I would like to have as much impact as possible, expand my tent pegs so that if I'm going to write something and it reaches and changes one life, can it reach 10 lives? Can it reach 100 lives? Can it reach 1,000? And I started praying like, Lord, I would love it if sometime I could reach 1,000 people. That would be amazing. And then it happened this year. And I was like, wow, okay, Lord, what would be really cool is if I could reach like 5,000 people in 2021 with all these different things I'm writing for CBN and Inspiration and different books. And wouldn't that be great? Use me. because I want to have an impact. I want to have an impact on the kingdom. I want to be used. And it hit 5,000, and then it hit 10,000, and then it hit 100,000. And now this year, 200,000 people and counting. This book isn't out yet. I have another story that just came out in the DaySpring book. You can probably ask your bookstore for that one. This one is Sweet Tea for the Soul, and it's the second one in this story. It's Comfort, Real Life Stories for the Grieving Heart. It's not just about people who are grieving because of the loss of a loved one. It's people who grieve for a lot of reasons. And my story in here is about what I just shared with you, a snippet of what I shared. It's a short story about when I crossed the bridge and left Maine and how hard that was. Yeah, see, it's still it's hard. So you don't have to be without the emotional. We don't have to be through all the emotions to be able to write something to change somebody else's life. So this one is out. These two are just emerging. And I'm like, wow, okay. So that's why we write. And so I would suggest to you, there are so many opportunities. If you have not got a copy of this book yet, you might ask your bookstore to order one, or Tina, or order it online at Amazon. It is the Christian Writers Market Guide. They produce it once a year. It's $29. I think it might be up to $35 by now, but really it's a small investment. In here, if you're not familiar, it's broken up by, if you're writing books, there are publishing houses, traditional Christian. This is all Christian material. Look at how big that is. It's cool. This is like my second Bible. I've got my Bible, and then I have this one. And I buy one copy every year and I use it faithfully. So there in here, you will find Christian publishers looking for manuscripts. You will find indie publishing houses that are offering different services if you do not have the ability to fully edit your material and do the graphics and do everything, format it, all of those types of things to bring it to a market standard. And this, I'll give a little caveat to that. I said I was big on indie publishing. I am very big on indie publishing. I've helped literally hundreds of people. Indie is independent publisher, otherwise known as self-publishing. And so my belief is that our finished material should look just like this one that was traditionally published. Not this thick, maybe, unless you're a novel writer, but it should be market standard. So there are publishing houses in here that help people do that. There are also independent editors and independent graphic designers that are listed in a different section, that if all you need is just editing service or publishing, graphics, they are there to help. The part that I really want you to think about for this week, and you may not have a copy, I believe there's digital copies available too, but I just like paper a lot. They're like my first love. A second, the Lord is my first love, but I love paper books. Anyway, there are periodicals listed in here, and there's a thick portion of them that tells you who, and it's not exhaustive. There are so many more, because I looked up ones that I write for, like Inspiration Ministries. That's not even listed in here. I'm like, oh, so it's not an exhaustive list, but it will list out for you who's accepting what type of works and what the submission guidelines are for that. And Tina, I do love your newsletters, and I love the fact that you're always, even in the group, posting, opportunities for you guys to grab a hold of, either a submission request. So, when you look at how many websites there are, which there are a lot right now, there are billions of websites, and a lot of just straight Christian websites that need content generated every single day. Every single day they're looking. So the writers' conferences that I've been going to, the statistics coming out, there are 20 or 30 pieces of content brand new to each of those websites every day. So if you have poetry, If you have devotions, if you have a short story, or if you write articles, like I'm writing some that are about spiritual life and how to grow in your faith, they are looking for content. So I would not miss that opportunity if I were you. I would look and see where are the opportunities. You can do an online search. I'm going to suggest to you, and I will send this to you, Tina, but there are, I realize that not everybody is tech savvy, but hopefully all of you are Facebook users. And if not, I highly encourage you to do that. It's controversial sometimes. I ignore the controversy and I use it for the Lord. So I get rid of anybody who's, causing controversy. So, they get blocked. But here are 10 Facebook groups that I have joined in the last 2 years since the pandemic hit. Okay, because we have all had extra time. So I'm going to list them, but I will send them to Tina and she can publish them. But there's one called Christian Writers for Life. I love this website. It's a Facebook group. So you don't pay money to join these. What the benefit of each of these groups is that you are networking with everyone else from all over the globe. Sometimes it's to encourage each other. Sometimes it's to share your content and say, hey, what do you think about it? A lot of the groups that I belong to will show different options for their covers and say, which cover do you like the best? What title do you like the best? So there's Christian Writers for Life. I already mentioned the Blue Ridge Conference writers. There's also Blue Ridge Reader Connection, which is a way to read each other's books. Christian Writers Network, Christian Indie Books, Christian Platform Builders. We've talked about how difficult it is to market. There are endless opportunities for us to learn from each other. There are experts in each area that we need. And so it's free. It's your time. And you can get access anytime. That I love because I juggle it in between everything else that's going on. Christian Podcast Guest and Christian Podcast Association. By the way, that's how I'm getting connected into podcasting. And then another one that I have belonged to that has been invaluable is the Marketers on a Mission Engage. That's Patricia Durgan, if you've ever heard of her. And she has a phenomenal group. And in that group of under 200, by the way, so it's a more intimate group, not thousands like the Blue Ridge Writers Association. But the Marketers on a Mission is under 200 people, and you're pretty much getting her individual attention and all the members helping each other on marketing issues of how to get, now we've done this work, how do we get it seen? What's the point of doing it all if we're not having it visible to anyone else? So those groups have become a mainstay for me. I have a day job. I'm not retired and I'm not able to write full time. There was a time when I did freelance full time and then I took a job at the church. So I don't have the ability to listen for 8 or 10 hours a day. And I don't think my brain could take that, but I do grab the nuggets. And then I look at what is next on my action steps. Reworking my website is something I need to get done. So these groups help, but they also will give you an avenue for getting your books out there and seen, for getting feedback from other like-minded, Christ-centered believers. So I highly recommend that you think about those. So the opportunities this week, get your Christian the Christian Markets Guide here, this one, the Christian Market Guide for 2021, 2022. And I will say this, times being what they are, if you don't already have it, you might want to wait and ask for it for Christmas, because the 2022, I didn't check before I just came on, but it should be coming out very soon. So you could ask the bookstore owner. He might help you out with that. So I would do that. I would join some Facebook groups. I would pray and ask the Lord, what part of your story does he want you to share in the next amount of time? And how does he want you to share it? I would consider, if you're using Facebook, that you would begin to, as I said, leak out some of your story. You'll be surprised at just a short sentence and a scripture to go with it, how much hope that will bring someone. So much hope, just a little bit. And then begin to seek out other avenues that you can branch out into. Ask the Lord, be brave enough and bold enough to say, all right, Lord, there's so many people that desperately need what you've done in my life. They need the hope and they need the answers. How can I do it? There's an endless list of possibilities. There's so much that you can't do it all, and neither can I. And the Lord will show you. So I started out very broad-based, and now I'm bringing it down and saying, okay, well, the one thing I didn't want to talk about is what you're making me funnel into. And so it's not that I won't do other things, but when I write devotions now, not just my books, but I'm saying to submit to websites. Inspiration is another one I just thought of. Ink, not in, but INK, inspiration.com. Tina Yeager is the head of that one. And you will get much hope yourself out of that, but there's also opportunities to submit devotions to there.